Today, I want to talk about why most creative practices fail. Why, whenever we schedule a time to show up and write or make art, do we either not want to show up to it or feel like it doesn't produce our best work? First, we need to talk about what a creative practice is. Seems pretty obvious, right? But you would be wrong. Your creative practice is a container that allows all of the unstable, non-solid, energetic processes of creativity to take place to create new life. Similar to how a fetus needs a womb to grow, a seed needs soil to germinate. All of those delicious parts of self and energies that come forward to alchemize into what we call art need some kind of structure to contain it and to protect it from the rest of everyday life and all of its chaos. And all creative containers, your creative practice included, are built around some kind of intention. That's the why am I making art of it all. Am I making art simply to express whatever is within me on a certain day, to explore something that I find interesting or that ignites my curiosity? Am I showing up to create because I would like to express this one singular defined thing? I have sort of like a thesis statement for everything I create that sort of brings all of my creative projects together. And every time I'm showing up to that creative container, I'm using that intention, that subject that I like to explore, that thing I'm trying to build in the world to organize my inner components and all of that inspiration that I've collected so that the most salient pieces come to the fore and so that I'm able to organize them in a way that helps me to actually convey that message and to enact that intention. Without some kind of creative container, without a creative practice, a lot of times art just doesn't get done, or it gets done in a very haphazard way, very inconsistently, and we're generally not producing our best work because there's nothing to sort of summon the best resources that we have internally and have collected from our external world in order to create something really novel, innovative, and also personal to us. So this brings us to the first reason why a lot of creative practices fail, and it's because you don't really know why you're making art. Or you think you know why you're making art, but that's not actually the real reason that you're making art. And I'll give you an example. Maybe you're a little bit of a perfectionist like me and many other artists I know, and you think that you're showing up to create simply because you like to make art, you want to make art, but secretly you're showing up to create because you're trying to prove to yourself that you have some kind of worth as a human being. Yeah, ouch. You think that if you make good art according to someone else's standards, or maybe even your own internal excessively lofty standards, that will give you some kind of purpose for being, that will mean you're a good human by some standard, that will make your life worth it in some way. And I'm not saying that art can't give you that sense of meaning. In order to really find a sense of fulfillment and purpose in your art, you have to discover what you actually like about art. Not the stuff you've been told to like, not the stuff that you've been told makes good art, the stuff that you actually enjoy making and that you enjoy consuming. You have to be open to being shaped by the art. Maybe you're trying to use your art as some kind of vehicle for these high-minded political messages. And that's important to you because you really care about those things and you want to make an impact on the world. But that's not what actually motivates you to make art. That's not where the animating force of your desire is trying to lead you. So there's no actual available energy to make those high-minded political art pieces. You actually just don't really care about that. You care about it, but you don't care about making art about it. You're trying to force your activism into your creative practice, and that's not what motivates you to be creative. That's not the core of your personal voice as an artist. But maybe you are clear on your intention of what you want to create, and you know what your actual desire is when it comes to artistic expression, what actually animates you and enlivens you and catalyzes you into action to make art. So then, why aren't you being catalyzed? Why aren't you showing up? Sometimes it's because your creative practice is not responsive to the moment, to the collective energies happening around you. And it's also not responsive to your internal cycles, to your internal energy levels, and what you actually feel like doing and what is most supportive and productive for you on a given day. Maybe you don't even know how to sense into that. Maybe you're lacking the somatic skills to feel into what you actually have energy for on a certain day and what you need, and how your creative practice can support those needs and help you to get those needs met. It's like maybe some days your art practice needs to be showing up to meditate, showing up to do some free writing, showing up to do like a little dance practice, a little like intuitive movement, a parts work session. Maybe your creative practice needs to be more internal and maybe even healing focused, more self-focused, more focused on exploring your interior and managing your own emotions, or working with the inspiration that's there to try to get it to an expressible form. Because a lot of times inspiration comes to us in a very like foggy, very watery, very blurry sort of image that we have to work out over time. We don't know exactly what this energy or inspiration coming to us wants to be. We have to figure that out by exploring it, maybe using some somewhat abstract skills. That particular part of creative practice is what I've probably spent the most time over the years trying to develop. I've learned all of these different modalities, a lot of them vaguely spiritual, a lot of them definitely psychological, in order to figure out how do I actually ferment and distill all of the inspiration in my channel that isn't coming to me in a logical form or as some kind of thesis statement or as some kind of like actual action I can take in the real world. I've tried some really funky things in an effort to learn how to process inspiration and sort of gestate an idea before it actually takes the shape of an idea. And then once you actually get your idea, then you have to start figuring out how to develop it. You're like, I have all these pieces, but how do I put them together? What pieces need to be tossed in the garbage? What pieces am I currently missing, and how do I go out and get them? And currently I see a lot of people trying to do that work with the help of AI. They're letting ChatGPT develop their ideas. And this is a huge mistake, because if you let ChatGPT develop your ideas for you, you will never learn the skills of how to develop your own ideas. We're looking at a specific cognitive, emotional, intuitive skill set here that you have to learn by practicing. And initially, when you start trying to learn it, it's very uncomfortable, it's very awkward, it's very frustrating, and it might make you feel stupid and like a bad artist, and you have to wade through all of those emotions and all of that resistance to actually learn those skills the same way you learn anything. For the most part, developing ideas just takes persistence. It takes willingness to show up in really unstable, constantly shifting environments where nothing is clear and nothing makes sense, and maybe your cognitive mind is not actually that helpful. Analysis is not going to get you anywhere on any given day trying to develop ideas. And you have to learn how to stick with the process and let those ideas steep. Most of it, honestly, is just being willing to be in the emptiness, being willing to show up every day and contemplate, to like sit outside, shut off your brain, shut off all of the external stimuli yelling at you, all of that stimulation, and just be in the emptiness and give cognitive resources back to your unconscious realms who are actually doing the work of processing and developing those ideas. And this is how it sort of proceeds. You move between that sort of like steeping, fermenting action of just creating space for the unconscious creative processes to run, and then moving back into your conscious analytical mind and working again with those ideas, trying to process them again, thinking about them again, turning them over, journaling about them, doing mind maps, all of that stuff that allows you to consciously process all of the stuff that's currently being unconsciously processed. And another part of honoring these cycles of creativity is, just like I mentioned before, these cycles of collective energy. What is actually happening in the energetic environment in the wider world that is available to be worked with. And the primary way that I like to work with these energies is through astrology, because astrology is always reflecting what's happening in our actual human environment and within ourselves. Astrology was the dominant practice of Hermeticism because Hermeticists believe, as above, so below, as within, so without. We live in a fractal reality where everything is reflecting each other at all times. And sometimes what we're struggling to get in contact with internally, the themes, archetypes, emotions, and energies that are moving through us can be best understood by looking outside of us and using things like astrology or even just omens in our actual environment, the things happening around us in the natural world, in order to make contact with those energies and to relate to them and to get more information on them. Astrology can give form to all of the gooey, shifty things that we struggle to know intellectually within ourselves, the things moving through our creative channel, moving through our body and our consciousness. It is an invaluable tool for creatives who want to build creative practices that are more flexible, that are more responsive, and that are just more exciting and productive to show up to. One of my favorite practices for when I'm creatively blocked is to look at what's happening in the heavens, look at all of the astrological transit and aspects currently taking place, analyze the archetypes, and really feel into them. What images arise whenever I think about these transits? What archetypes come up? Like, what stories maybe come up whenever I think about all of these planetary movements and how they're all talking to each other at any given moment? And how do I see that reflected in my daily life? How is that showing up for me right now? Even if I feel like I'm making it up, it doesn't matter. It gets me relating to those energies and really feeling into them. And it gets those unconscious creative processes, those cogs turning, and helping me actually distill the inspiration that maybe I don't even know is there. Another reason that you might not be showing up to your creative practice is that it's a little bit too responsive to the moment. You don't have enough of a structure in place, enough of a predictable pattern to return to, that you're just kind of showing up every day like, what do I do with myself? And you usually end up making the wrong choice. You end up doing some random stuff that by the end of it feels like a waste of time because you didn't really take the time to feel into what's going on with you internally or what's happening in your environment, or coming back to that intention, that like creative container to decide what would be most valuable for me to work with today. How should I approach this intention on this given day? You just kind of took a shot in the dark. You did some random shit and it didn't pan out and you got nothing out of it. This is why the cornerstone of my creative practice has become a little practice I like to call dreaming into the day. And what I do in this practice is blindingly simple and would have probably sounded stupid and unproductive to me a couple years ago. But I basically show up to my hammock outside on my porch. I bring some bird seed for the nature spirits, and I thank them for their continued support in helping me process my ideas and express myself creatively. I invite them to help me find a direction to take for the day. I bring my journals, and I just sit there. And I think about sort of what's been on the docket lately, what I've been thinking about doing, what topics feel most salient to me, what themes feel most salient to me at any given moment, what feels most inspiring and exciting to me. And if no answers immediately arise to that question, I just sit with it for a while. And I look at the birds, and I look at the plants, and I create an empty space for that information to emerge. And usually during this process, I'll just write down any random thoughts that pop into my head. They might seem inane and stupid and like I don't even know what they mean, but any images, thoughts, or sensations that arise, I write them down. I treat them as important information, and I treat the act of making them conscious and consciously processing them as an important activity for me to get more information on them, for me to gain more clarity on them, and sort of receive the messages that spirit, my environment, my guides, my God self are trying to present to me on that day. And I'm telling you, usually within like 15 to 30 minutes of doing this practice, I know exactly what I want to do that day. I know exactly what the best practice is for me and how I should actually take action towards my creative goals. Even if it seems a little bit oblique and a little bit abstract and a little bit out there. I know what kind of action feels right in my gut to take, and that action always eventually leads me to the thing that I actually want to do. It leads to some kind of productive creative activity where I'm writing articles, or I'm drawing something, or I'm devising like a new PDF or course to make. It always coagulates into some kind of concrete creative project if I stick with it over time and keep returning to all of that abstract, gooey, energetic stuff. Because all ideas are energy. They're emotions and sensations and images before they're actual thoughts or ideas or like fully defined projects. That's why I keep saying it. You have to come back to these abstract modes of relating to the energy, of fermenting and distilling your inspiration, and allow it to gestate on its own. Like, allow it to come to fruition and allow it to tell you how to take action instead of you trying to tell it how it should be taken action on. Instead of you telling it how you think that it needs to be created. And I keep talking about persistence here, and that means that we got to bring the D word into the discussion, and that's discipline. And discipline's best buddy, their favorite pal that actually helps us get everything done, is the other D word, devotion. Devotion runs on desire. It's that animating, enlivening, exciting force that tells us this is what I'm curious about. This is what I'm motivated to explore. This is why I create art. And this is why I feel like creating the specific art that I feel like creating today, even if it doesn't make sense to my logical mind. But that's why devotion and desire, they're like this. They're best friends. They can't function without each other. Because in order to show up regularly to your desire and exercise devotion towards that desire, sometimes you have to apply a little bit of force. And this isn't like the capitalistic, like hustle culture that we've been taught of just do the thing even when you don't feel like it. You find ways to make yourself feel like it by getting back in contact with that desire. This is not just a process of thinking about why we like to make the art, why it's important to us, why we're actually devoted to the creative process. It's a practice of actually somatically getting in contact with that feeling, bringing that energy up in our body, allowing it to infuse all of our cells and catalyze us into action. And the way you do this is usually by playing. You just play. You explore, you get curious, you try to find that spark again by looking for like what sounds yummy. I'm gonna say this over and over again in this video today because this is really the basis of creative practice. You have to find ways to make yourself excited to do the work and not make yourself in an artificial forced way, but actually allow that energy to be authentically reborn within you every single day. That's why a lot of my creative practices just start out with games. They start out with me writing about a thing that makes no sense and has nothing to do with anything I'm actually trying to get done right now, because it feels fun, because it feels exciting. And usually if I follow that thread long enough, it leads me to the thing that I actually think I want to do. Or it leads me to something more important. Or it leads me to building the resources so that I'm able to show up and do that thing the next day or the day after that, or when my body is actually ready to do that work. Because sometimes you gotta rest. And not all rest is doing nothing. And not all rest is scrolling TikTok and watching TV. Some rest is actually play. Some rest is active rest, is finding a gentle, soothing activity that builds energy and actually refreshes and revitalizes you. And some days you might show up to your creative practice and you don't want to play. You don't want to find the spark. You don't want to do any of that. And you shouldn't force yourself. That's why I start my practices by going out and sitting in the hammock and just being with the emotions that come up. Because that's my way of getting in contact with my inner parent parts so that they can turn to these inner child and teen parts that think they don't want to do the thing today and be like, okay, maybe that's true, but let's actually process the emotions coming up so that we can be sure that's true. Let's actually see what needs to be done about those emotions or how those emotions need to be met. Like, let's not just dissociate into the TV or the TikTok scroll. Let's actually meet those feelings head on and work with them, channel and express them, or simply be present with them. And usually by just being present with them, I move through the resistance and I come back to the same reality that I face every single day, which is that I do want to make art. I do want to show up to my creative practice. I do want to actually do all of these projects that I say that I want to do. I just may not want to do them that day. And I may not want to do them the way that I think they need to get done. Maybe I need to come up with some other creative solution for getting things done. Or maybe my inner child and teen parts need a day that's just all about them. That's just me spending time with them and what they want to do, and maybe addressing some unmet need coming up from my childhood, where there was a day where they really needed to do something else in the routine that was set out for them, and the adults in my life did not have the emotional intelligence to actually help them be with those feelings and make the right decision that was responsive to their actual needs in the moment. You know, that old reparenting stuff. And you might notice that all of these ways that I'm telling you to exercise discipline don't really feel like discipline. It's more like kind of tricking yourself into doing the thing that you know deep down you want to do. Not through force or manipulation, but through making yourself actually take care of yourself and actually be with your own emotions and actually move through those emotions. Identify the underlying need, meet that need, create space and energetic resources for the thing that you're currently not able to do. And over the years of trying to address these blocks and this resistance that comes up in my creative practice, I have built hundreds of different rituals and modalities and little like practices and tricks that I try to work through these little hurdles. And that's now what I currently teach people to do in my new membership program, Court of the Rising Sun. In Court of the Rising Sun, I'm helping you create the creative practice of your dreams, learning how to operate your creative channel and distill and ferment all of your inspirations to root deeply into your inner world and get in contact with those aspects of self that maybe you haven't even met yet, so that you can mold all of those raw materials into your most potent, most alive, most ecstatic art. And in this program, we do this by providing you yearly, quarterly, and monthly support with lots of contemplation prompts, group rituals, one-on-one calls with me to help you stay engaged and focused on your creative goals and actually working through the resistance and the creative blocks that come up instead of just burying your head in the sand and dissociating into the TikTok scroll and pretending that you do not see it. If you want to learn more about what this program has to offer and whether it might be right for you and how to apply to join, just go to the link down below and submit your application before August 25th. You can also shoot me an email at graygarland.coaching@gmail.com and we can chat more about it. I hope to see you there.